Welcome, my name is Chris Lee. I recently did a webinar series talking about purpose, goal setting, and developing the right tribe for you. And today's webinar is all about developing purpose. If you're struggling with having clarity on why you wake up every day, if you're having trouble defining the reason that you do the things you do, this is the webinar for you. Inside, you'll hear some tips and tricks that I've developed over the years, some questions that you can ask yourself so you can begin to immediately implement the steps to define, refine, and begin to sculpt the purpose for your life. Tonight, we're going to be talking about purpose. Some of you may have heard some of these stories before, and that's okay. It's good to rehear some of these. But I'm going to talk through a little bit of my thoughts on developing purpose, some exercises you can do. So if you do have pen and paper, now would be a great time to grab some, just so you can take some notes or work through the exercises once we get there. Awesome. Welcome back.
Okay, better.
Cool. Probably another minute or so to let folks trickle in, and then we're going to jump into it. Anybody have any good jokes before we get kicked off?
Oh my gosh. The only jokes I have are like really, really weird kid jokes right now. So, or actually very off-color jokes. So either end of the spectrum, probably not great.
That's fair. Right on. Just so you guys know, I am going to be doing a bit of a Q&A at the end. So if you do have questions and you need them answered immediately, just get my attention and we'll jam on it for sure. Or you can type it in the chat and I'll see it, and then I could probably address it as we go. Or if you just want to save it for the end, just know we are going to do a little Q&A at the very end, and then we're rolling. Everybody good? Cool. I got to get my, there we go. All right. I'm going to start off by reading a little something from the workbook that all the clients get. If you haven't received a copy of it yet, let me know. I'll email it to you. But the workbook is really just kind of the framework on how to structure identity, set those long-term goals, backwards plan, so you've got a clear picture of how to lay out the next couple of years. But this is an opening excerpt from that workbook. Stagnation has a cumulative effect. The cost of staying where you are is putting on extra weight, which makes you not want to train, which means you gain more weight. Before you know it, you're 30 pounds heavier than a healthy you should be. You stop reading books because Netflix is easier and doesn't require anything of you. You slowly become boring. You have nothing interesting to talk about because you've filled your brain with the latest episode of The Kardashians or The Walking Dead. You've chosen not to learn a new skill or master an interesting subject, and so you're just like everybody else. You're anxious all the time and have trouble focusing on anything longer than 3 minutes because TikTok has conditioned you to have the attention span of a goldfish. This will lead to being forgetful or scatterbrained. At first, you chalk it up to just getting older, where in actuality, you've simply chosen not to train your mind by practicing meditation. Your relationship with your kids suffers because you're too tired to play with them or too addicted to your phone to listen to them. Or your spouse is growing more frustrated with you because the passion has left the relationship. Or he or she feels like they're getting your leftovers because you haven't been intentional with spending time with them. They've become an afterthought instead of a priority. Then you are confused when you come home one day and they're not there. And you're barely making ends meet. Bills always seem due, and you can't even remember what your last 10 purchases were. But you can tell me exactly how the fantasy football team is doing and who's winning the league so far. The cost of doing nothing is slow and insidious. It sneaks up on you. And before you know it, you're nowhere near where you wanted to be at this stage in your life. So now what? All right. Again, I appreciate you listening to that. I want to tell you a couple stories. As an Army vet, or as any vet, we love to tell stories, so I've got a couple for you tonight. So buckle up. All right, there's this guy, Kevin. He wanted to do a cross-country trip And he packed up his car. It's a little Subaru, and he started in Virginia, and he loaded up with all of his essentials like sleeping bag and clothes and stuff like that. And he's cruising across the country, and he's making great time. Somewhere in Kansas, he stopped at a gas station because he needed to fill up and he needed to get some lickies and chewies. And he pumps his gas, and then he goes in to as he was walking into the gas station, it's like one of those old timey mom and pop style. As he's walking in, he notices a dog laying on the front porch, and the dog's just laying there. It's like an old hunting dog, and it's just whimpering. And he kind of gives it a side eye, and he walks in. He goes to the back and gets his, Snickers bars and vanilla Coke. Goes to the front, pays for his snacks and his gas, and he strikes up a conversation with the cashier. And it's one of those old timers that's just been there forever. He's like, "Hey, what's up with that dog on the front porch?" "Oh, that's Buford." "Well, what's wrong with him? Why is he whimpering?" "Oh, he's laying on a nail." "Well, why doesn't he move?" "I guess it just doesn't hurt bad enough yet." Okay, I want you to keep that in mind as I tell you this next story. Some of you or all of you know my origin story of why I'm here now. And I can kind of trace it back to when I was in Virginia before the Army. I was working at this fancy hotel, and this was like a five-star resort type area. And we had celebrities coming in sometimes, and that was, interesting. But my job within the hotel, uh, my title was activities coordinator. When I started doing the job, it actually just meant like a concierge on steroids. So my main purpose was to help people with their dinner reservations. Every now and then I would go out and teach kids how to play frisbee golf, which was phenomenal. Every night I would roast marshmallows for them because that was part of my job description, which again was spectacular. As time progressed, there was this one evening that the dining room was a little short staffed. So they asked the activities department to, "Can you please help out?" "Absolutely. Yeah, let's go do it." I remember walking into the kitchen, and the folks there handed me this tray of food. Said, "Hey, go to table 13." "Okay, Roger that." And I carried this tray of food out and I start delivering it to the patrons, and everybody was super polite. Nobody was rude. Nobody, called me a name or lazy or whatever. It was a very pleasant exchange between me and these patrons. And I delivered their food, smiled, started walking back to the kitchen. And it was in this moment that I became just unnecessarily furious. Like this like really interesting well of anger just like spurted out of me. I didn't lash out at anybody or didn't say anything. I just kind of like bottled it up and just held on to it. And I was like, what is that? And why am I feeling it? And and the answer to that question is really like, Chris, there's more out there than what you're doing. Go do it. And and at that point, it's not like the job was hard or bad. It was actually doing really well. Like the management structure there was starting to groom me towards more supervisory positions within my department, which would then lead to other supervisory positions over other departments. I was able to pay my bills mostly, and like I said, it was an easy job, but it wasn't very fulfilling, and it wasn't very satisfying. It was just getting the job done, you know. And so this is this like well of anger and fury that kind of erupted that night was the beginning of this journey that became a military career, and then now doing what I do now. So after that evening, we'd finished helping out the dining room. I immediately went back to the work computer at the desk and started Googling military branches I could potentially join because I knew something needed to be different. And part of that equation was, Chris, participation trophies are no longer acceptable. Chase after something where success is not guaranteed. And that was a big component in like my decision making paradigm is like I want to see how far I can go. I want to see how much potential I have and what that looks like if I actually tried to go get it. And so for the next few months, I stuck with the job, and for the next couple months, I started looking for recruiters. And admittedly, I spoke to the Marine recruiters first, and they essentially said, "Hey, why are you getting into the military so late in the game?" I was 27 at the time, and I kind of chuckled. I was like, "Bro, I'm in pretty good shape. Like, what's the problem?" But he was looking for somebody that was like fresh out of high school that they could mold perfectly, right? So I left the Marine recruiters and talked to an Army recruiter, and they told me about this 18 X-ray program, which is essentially going from a civilian to Green Beret uh, without having to do a bunch of other prior service. It's like go to basic training, airborne school, and then into selection, and hopefully, if you make it, you go to the Q course. So so that's what I started to pursue, and it was in kind of that process where I realized like, okay, I'm not prepared for this journey that I'm trying to go on, and that's okay, but I need to start getting prepared. I need to start taking some steps to get to where I'm going, where I want to go. Which meant I walked into a gym and started lifting weights, not really knowing how to do it properly, but I started doing something until eventually I developed a program or found a program online and then worked through that. And that started to structure my path a little bit better. Okay, so Chris, why are you telling me this story? Uh, the the reason I'm telling you this story is because this all kind of centers around purpose, and that's kind of like this like ethereal word, like well, what does that even mean? What is purpose? How do you define life's purpose? And to be honest, I'm not entirely sure yet, even to this day. But what I can say is purpose is that like why why do you do the things you do? Why do you wake up in the morning? Why do you go to the gym? Why do you balance your checkbook? It is the fuel by which you do things to get to a desired end state, right? So okay, so this is the exercise I want you to do real quick, and it's going to help kind of shape this idea of purpose moving forward. Uh, if y'all humor me for just a moment, shut your eyes and imagine yourself sitting in your rocking chair on your front porch. You're at the twilight of your life. Maybe you're 90 or 100 years old. And I want you to think about your story that you've been able to tell throughout the course of your life. Look around and actually like feel the weather. Like, is the breeze blowing? Is it summertime? Is it winter and you're drinking a cup of coffee? Who's surrounding you? What kind of people are there? Is it family? Is it kids and grandkids and maybe great grandkids? Are you by yourself? Is it just a significant other? Is it really close friends? And as you're picturing this kind of moment on your front porch in your rocking chair, uh, look back on the life that you have lived for those 90 or 100 years, and and ask yourself, was it a good story? Was my story worth remembering? And what kind of legacy do I want to leave behind? Okay, you can open up your eyes now. The rocking chair test is something that I try to do with folks often, because it's kind of like this visualization of how we want our lives to go. And we're at a point now where we can steer that path, and we can bust out our compass and create that azimuth to get to that desired end state. Purpose is one of those things where I'm convinced that even if you don't know exactly how to articulate it right now, you can begin shaping it moving forward. And it can be a process. It doesn't have to be this like, well, I've written out my life's mission statement and it's set in stone and I have it all defined right now. I'm I was raised by artists. And that's like a polite way of saying they were hippies, and that's totally okay. Uh, but but art is kind of like an important part of my life because I grew up around it. And so maybe your purpose isn't something you've been able to define quite yet. Maybe it's something that's like just something is missing right now, wherever your station is currently in life, and you want to define it. This is how I would approach it. Start start visualizing this purpose as a giant block of marble. And within that marble somewhere is a statue that you get to carve. And that is your purpose. That is the reason why you get up every day. It's the reason why you train in the gym. It's the reason why you take care of the people around you. And somewhere locked in that block of marble is a well-defined, well-articulated why. But you don't know how to get to it yet. You just know there's this big chunk of stone right in front of you. So this is what I would recommend doing. Start chiseling away the things you know you don't want your purpose to be. So maybe that looks like this. I know I don't want my purpose to be, a lazy slob that sits on the couch all day. I know that's not what I want it to be. And so I can chisel that part of the block of stone away. And I know my purpose is not one of isolation where I'm a hermit somewhere, but rather it involves like deep connection with the people I care about a great deal. And so I can chisel away that block or that piece of stone and say, no, I don't want to be isolated. I want to have deep connection. Maybe your purpose includes like, I don't want to have a temper. I want to feel my emotions. I want to experience that part of life, but I don't want to like blow up at people just because something was said. And so you can start chiseling away at that piece of the marble as well. And after a while, shape starts to take into this block of marble, and you can start visualizing that purpose a little bit more concretely. Does that kind of make sense so far? Cool. Okay. So I want you to take a minute, if you got your pen and paper, and as you know, my coaching philosophy, it's broken down into 5 categories. So mental, physical, emotional, social, and financial. Take just a minute and if you don't know what your true purpose is quite yet, write down what you don't want it to be in each of those categories. And we're going to share in just a minute. So if I'm going to give you about 60 seconds to bang out a couple, and then I'd like to hear some feedback from you all. So, all right. Does anybody have one or two they want to share? Not all at once.
Shall I kick it off?
Yeah, send it, man.
Yeah. So the main one that comes up for me it's specifically clear right now at my stage of my life when I'm building the foundation.
Yeah,
And when I look forward, I don't want to be chasing scraps. And what I mean by that is I can't you have to for me at least, I have to pick one path that aligns with what I want to do and then stick to it so that it can build something actually tangible and substantial.
yeah,
Because if we're one of those jumping from thing to thing to thing, almost like TikTok swiping, then
yeah,
it's gonna lead to disappointment over and over and over again. And bringing that a little bit to your purpose analogy,
yeah,
you will look back with more regret than anything else.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well said. Anybody else?
Um, mhm.
Yeah, go
Okay,
ahead.
hi. First of all, I think I need to talk right now to wake me up because it's very late in Germany. And yeah, and first of all, I came up with this idea that if I mean, for example, what I visualized right now is that if I actually don't know how to scrape up my marble, it's
Yeah,
rather I have to get out of my orbit to ask for help. Yeah.
yeah,
And I think that's really very difficult for me. And I think even for today's, actually, I had been writing many, many things on your like paper. And personally, like I had personal question while I was reading your like story.
yeah,
Is that like maybe another thing I really need to focus on, like kind of like if I don't know how to like carve my sculpture is
right.
especially I also don't know how to deal with people who are very like not disciplined or they're like very induced in TikTok or but rather they blame on me being just following my own paths. And rather, I think really it's very, like, even mostly in that moment, I think I really need to rather make that quantum leap, like, get out of my sculpture, maybe, and to ask out for help. That was my thought.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent thought too. Yeah, this exercise of like visualizing the marble and the purpose hidden in there somewhere. Sometimes you can get tunnel vision and and you're so afraid to maybe make the wrong chisel off of the marble that it will mess up the whole thing, and now the whole thing's ruined. It's totally okay to step back, uh, maybe take a walk, and that's like metaphorically or literally, and come back to the art because it's in there somewhere, right? And if you don't know how to use the tools yet, uh, talking to people that have gone through that process and have already chiseled their statue, say, hey, what tools did you use in this area, or how do you use them? That's an excellent point that you brought up. Um, and that's a big component of my coaching too, is like, don't do this by yourself. Don't feel like you have to do this by yourself. Uh, I'm looking at the folks that are in attendance here, and every single one of us have such different backgrounds and different like personal stories. Like, what in the world would we have in common? Well, what we have in common is that we take this work seriously. The idea of shaping purpose for ourselves is serious work, and all of us take it seriously. And so some of us might be further along than others. Some of us might be just starting, and it's okay to ask, like, "Hey, what do you think of this?" Um, I used to draw a lot, like in high school and college, and I hated it. I hated it when somebody was looking over my shoulder while I was drawing because all of a sudden there was this pressure of like, oh no, I have to perform for them, even though this piece of work might have just been for me. I might have had no intention of sharing it with anybody, but now somebody is like viewing it, and I feel like I have to perform perfectly for them, even though it's mine, right? It's the same with this practice of like developing purpose. You might have people that peek over your shoulder and start to critique you and say, hey, well, why did you do it that way? That's okay. It's okay to ignore them. And say, hey, this is my art. This is the sculpture that I'm creating for my life. You might not see what I see yet, but just give me some time to keep chiseling away, and then you'll see what I had in my mind. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I think it's really, I mean, my focus is to not really take like personal of
Yeah,
other people's opinions. Yeah.
right. Exactly. Yeah. Cool. Anybody else want to share one or two? Okay.
I'll
All
share
right.
one.
Yeah, please do. Please do.
And this is what we don't want, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I really appreciate that you mentioned, I'll start off by saying like when you mentioned marble,
Mhm.
my first thought was, well, why couldn't it be like clay? Because marble is very, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's just the pressure. A Carrera
Right.
piece of Carrera marble. I mean, you don't want to make the wrong stroke, right?
Right.
So that's a self-created pressure.
Mhm.
And I think like what I'm working with right now is how authentically am I actually living my life because of the what feel like right now kind of like constraints of
Yeah.
who I'm being or to accommodate and facilitate, being who I am in a marriage or being who I am as a parent or
Right.
just having those domestic like kind of householder responsibilities.
Sure.
Who is Diana when I can completely cut loose and I have the freedom, money, no object, or something like what are my choices versus on any given Tuesday?
Right.
And how to reconcile that because I don't believe that, as I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, you the first gentleman who spoke, you really do have to choose. And choosing means leaving things out. So
Right.
at this point in my life, it's important for me to really dial in that authentic part and then see how I can lift side, those sides of myself up.
Yeah. No.
So I'm not living with that kind of, I don't know, it feels like a facade. Like I'm just,
Yeah.
like you said in the beginning on paper, I've heard you say that on paper, it's amazing,
Right.
but yeah, so it's a little different when the sum total of my life is like when I'm really looking at it, I don't
Mhm.
want to not live authentically.
Yeah. Yeah. Great point. And I found that like as we're working through life, uh, there will constantly be these like expectations, either self-imposed or externally imposed upon us, right? Having that statue carved out of the marble, it's another way to look at it is it creates this lens or filter by which you can start saying no to things. And I found that like saying no is actually a very freeing exercise because it allows you to put a boundary up between you and stuff that doesn't matter or doesn't align with this purpose, this identity that you're creating for yourself. And so it might seem counterintuitive by saying no, you're like limiting yourself. Like no, in actuality, if you can dial in exactly what authentically Diana is, when you can dial that in and carve it out of marble, the saying no part is like it's very clear this other external expectation doesn't align with this purpose, so I'm going to say no, and I have like a guilt-free conscience in doing so, does that kind of make sense?
Well, it makes complete sense. I think what I'm hearing from you is that clarity of that no.
Yeah.
I feel reconciled in that I have my no over here. And yet,
Right.
if I hold up that no, I'm going to create a lot of instability over here.
I see.
And
Yeah.
so it's like, how ready do I want, how willing am I? Like, what's the trade-off? What's the actual cost? So I think that's with some things that's the place I'm standing in. So
Yeah.
to have that clarity, yes, but it's that guilt part or that honoring myself part. That's the
Yeah.
rub right now.
Yeah, I can understand that for sure.
Yeah.
This journey isn't always like clear cut. Sometimes it gets a little messy. It is often like bushwhacking through the wilderness, and sometimes you take the long way around, uh, and that's okay too. Um, the cool thing about this group is we're all doing it together, and so you don't have to navigate by yourself. And as we shape this block of marble into something meaningful to us, uh, you've got other people that are wielding their own tools and chiseling away at marble at the same time. You know,
Yeah, that helps.
good. Okay, so I start off with a story of the dog laying on the nail, and and I start with that story because I think it's rather profound. Oftentimes we are cruising through life and it's uncomfortable. We know something is off, something's not quite jiving, but it doesn't hurt bad enough yet to do anything about it. And some people, it requires hitting rock bottom before they make serious change in their life. And like the individual that comes to mind when I say that is like David Goggins. I think most of us here have at least heard of him. His story began, he was obese, working a job that he absolutely hated. He was exterminating cockroaches and he was miserable. And that was rock bottom for him. He had a very rough upbringing. And he hit this point where it's like, I just can't do this anymore. And everything changed. The reason I tell the story about the dog on the nail is I'm trying to avoid the rock bottom part because that can be really painful. Uh, what I want you to do is if you are uncomfortable, if something in your gut, in your instincts are saying that something is not quite right, I want you to recognize it and then examine it. Because you don't need to be laying on a nail forever, uh, just just uncomfortably cruising through life. And that's what this process, this little exercise is all about. It's it's really a means by which to recognize the nail so you can get up off the nail and go lay somewhere more comfortable or do something more substantial like go if if we're using the dog analogy go chase rabbits or something like that. There's no sense in one hitting rock bottom if we can avoid it, and two, there's no sense in laying on that nail forever. Does that kind of make sense? Cool. Okay, so after that moment in the dining room where I got just angry, I think that was my point. It was definitely not rock bottom. I was not like at the end of my rope there. I want you to recognize that. But it was the point that I recognized I was laying on a nail and I did something about it. So I'm gonna tell another story now. So uh, fast forward, I get into the army, I get through basic training, I get through airborne school without breaking any bones, and then I go to special forces selection. I get through that and I got selected. Awesome. I was like flying high. I was stoked. I because like when I was working at the hotel and I started to like visualize me as a Green Beret, this was part of the process. This is the part of the steps that I was able to visualize and see materialize. And then it happened. And then I saw it happen. Like I experienced it, and it was phenomenal. And then I get through 3 years of the Q course and finally make it to a team. And I start doing Green Beret things, which was phenomenal. I was first stationed in Stuttgart, Germany, and so we did a lot of work with within the Baltic countries. Like I did one of my first trips was to Denmark, was like one of my favorite trips, and then Estonia. I did some work in Latvia, Lithuania, Poland. Like great experiences. But when I signed up for the military, there was this like portion in my brain, and this stems from me being when I was a little boy. I wanted to be the hero of something. And the army kind of provides that opportunity in some cases. Like I want to go be the hero. And so I get orders to Fort Carson, Colorado. I moved to Colorado, and then word has it like we're getting ready to deploy to Afghanistan. And in my head, all right, here's my chance. Here's my opportunity to answer that question that at least every man is asking, but probably every woman as well. Do I have what it takes? That question is like deep in our DNA, and I wanted an answer. Do I have what it takes? So I thought Afghanistan was going to be my opportunity to do that. We get to Afghanistan, and it was not what I expected at all. It was it was towards the end of our time there. It was 2021, and we essentially weren't allowed outside the wire. outside of the base. We were kind of stuck there because there hadn't been an American casualty in a long time, and nobody wanted one. So they were like, just don't leave. So we were on base for 6 months, and when you've got 12 dudes living in a house together that all were trained for a very specific reason, and then you don't let them do that reason, it can be difficult. And so we come back home having not really done anything for 6 months. We left our families, we missed birthdays and anniversaries to go and not do the job we signed up for. And I want to state, like, I'm not bloodthirsty. I'm not looking to go enact violence, but it was really, I wanted an opportunity to answer that question. Do I have what it takes? And I never got the opportunity to. So I get home, the wife and kids go on vacation, and so I'm by myself at the house, and I'm really wrestling with this, like, what did I just spend 10 years of my life doing? At that point, I'd spent almost a decade in the Army. It's like, why? What was the point? When I enlisted, I was super stoked. I was like, I am fulfilling my purpose. And when we got back home from that trip, it felt as though that purpose had been robbed of me. And I got to a really dark spot. Like I said, I was home alone, and probably drinking way too much alcohol. And I pulled my sidearm off the top shelf of my office and put it in my mouth, because I was like, what's the point? And I'm grateful that I didn't make that kind of decision, and I stepped away from the abyss. But I bring that story up because when you don't have a purpose, it can be a dangerous place to be. Because now it feels like you're just wandering in the darkness, right? And if you ever experience as though you've had a purpose and it was stolen from you or robbed of you or taken away from you, that can be a rough spot to be in. And so the point of me saying that story is, like, if you get to that point where you're in the darkness and you're on the edge of the abyss, you have to find or create your purpose again. And it's difficult. It's like carving rock. It's carving marble. And it's a process, and it takes a long time. But that's the only way to step away from the abyss. That's why I think this part of the journey is so important, because it's almost a defense measure against the darkness, if you ever find yourself there. Because if you are just beaten down and beat up, and life is just wrecking you, if you have that why in the back of your head, if you have that carved marble in front of you, you can get up and face it again. It's that why that gets us out of bed. It's that why that keeps us going when it's difficult. And that's why I encourage you to, on a daily basis, chip away at that marble. If you don't know what your purpose is yet, find all the things you don't want it to be and start carving. At some point, that purpose will materialize, at least to the point where you can put words on it. I always found it difficult. Like, how in the world am I supposed to articulate my life's purpose and meaning in a sentence or two? That sounds absurd to me. If you carve enough of the marble away, that sentence, that paragraph, that statement will emerge, and it'll get you through. Does that kind of make sense? Sweet. Okay. At this point, I do want to open it up to questions. So if you have questions about anything we've talked about, any of the exercises, I'd like to hear them. So fire away.
Actually, like for the last part,
Yeah.
I personally didn't understand, because like when you actually, but maybe it's a question. When you like try to create your own marble, how big did you visualize your marble? It's like because I think Diana also pointed out that what if it was a clay? Like
Right.
when you try to build something or rather try to kind of crack something, did it start off with very big marble or like was it kind of on your hands?
Yeah.
Like how big did you actually start to create your like purpose?
That's an excellent question. And this is how I view it. If if the giant block of marble is too intimidating, that's okay. Grab a small chunk, put it in your hand, and practice. So, Chris, well, what does that mean? Like, how do I translate that into literal sense? All right. So, say like your life's purpose is the big block of marble, the 14-foot tall chunk of marble that you're going to work on. That's for life. But I can't handle that right now. That is too intimidating. I am not prepared or skilled enough to deal with that yet. Grab a little piece off the ground, and this is today. What do I want to how do I want to live my life today that is meaningful to me? So maybe that's as simple as I'm going to I'm going to ensure that I get some sunshine and some exercise today. Because living a healthy life is important to me. So you start chipping away at that to shape it. And maybe it's like I haven't talked to my one friend in 3 months. I don't want to lose that relationship. I'm going to call them. And so you start chipping away at that. And maybe it's my mind is starting to feel dull. I want to sharpen it with the tools available to me. So I grab a book and start reading through. Maybe it's just one page today, and you start chipping away at that little chunk of marble. And so now you've got a semblance, almost like a model of what the life will look like, but it's in your hands and it's more manageable because it's smaller. Does that kind of make sense? And then you also mentioned like how big should you visualize? That's kind of up to you. It's like how substantial is purpose to you? For me, it's because because I walked through the darkness for that brief period, like purpose is like a big deal to me. And so I need something that is going to be able to I can plop in the middle of my house and I can't miss it. It's something that I have to see all the time. I can't hide it away in my pocket somewhere. But rather it's like I want it huge and long lasting. Because another word you could use for purpose is legacy. Is how do you want to be remembered after you're done sitting in your rocking chair at 90 years old? And so part of that has to extend beyond just self, but into future generations. Like how will the people that I knew remember me after I'm gone? Does that kind of make sense?
Oh, yeah, it makes sense, and maybe it's better I give like voices to the other members as well. But like
Okay.
rather I think it might be better I just write it later.
Okay, that's fine too.
Because like I rather like when I think of marble, I rather am okay. Like I kind of wanted to actually destroy it until it becomes sand. So I kind of view my life rather very not really meaningful, but like meaningless, not in a morbid way, but like
Right.
anyway, I'm gonna go back to nature. It's like just have fun. So it's
Yeah.
uh, so
No,
maybe it's
no, I can understand that for sure. Yeah, it's not a morbid thing. It's like the things we do here are temporary. At some point, it is very likely that all of us will die at some point and, return to dust, right? And so the meaning that you find in the work that you do is either meaning that you put there, which is fine, or meaning that other people find in it. And that's kind of what I mean by that, creating that legacy, if that makes sense.
yeah, that makes sense. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Anybody else?
That's pretty good. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, buddy. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, you bet.
Cool, man. Any other thoughts or questions?
Can somebody have more than one purpose?
Yeah, why not? Do you have an example? Like different purposes for different periods of life or multiple statues at the same time?
Okay. So right now, um, I'm working on two different things, which I call my career and my purpose. The
Yeah.
one is I like designing products, and I've designed quite a few different things, um, like different products and whatever else. I really, really enjoy that. But I
Mhm.
also really enjoy speaking on a stage and motivating other people to live a better life.
Yeah.
I even wrote a book about it, all that good stuff, right? And so this one part of me is like when I looked at the broad spectrum, let's say the big giant chunk of marble, I whittled it down to these two things. Like all the things that I could do in my life, I decided I was going to just do these two, and I'm going to do these two things until I either make it or break it. You know, like I'm confirmed absolutely this was a great idea or this was just a terrible idea. Never should have done it. So, in a sense, that's why I call it my career. My career, design products. Like I want to go in my shop and design something up, 3D print, whatever, put it together, send it to the customer, yada yada, whatever. And then on Saturday and Sunday, go to LA. Never mind, LA's on the brain, right? Go
Right.
to like Dallas or
Yeah.
somewhere and give a speech or um, be involved in a conference somehow. And like that's what I want to do with the remainder of my life. So is
Yeah.
my purpose, changing lives, and so my career on the other hand being
Yeah.
product designer.
Yeah. So that reminds me of this concept that my buddy Travis and I kind of came up with, and we called it the Costco effect. So Costco is this big store where you can buy in bulk all kinds of things like toilet paper or turkeys or whatever you want. And the Costco effect is this, and we were both on the same ODA or team when we were Green Berets, and it's could we be happy working at Costco? And we talked about it for a couple of days, and the answer was, yeah, I think so. But we would have to find fulfillment somewhere. And so Costco would be the career. It would be the thing that pays the bills, that fuels the purpose, whatever the purpose or the fulfillment is. Lee, in your case, like motivational speaking and like helping others improve their lives, that sounds a lot like purpose. And then the career is the means by which you fuel that until it's up and running on its own, right? And so for Travis and I, the Costco effect is like changing tires at Costco or working in the bakery would be fine as long as we were able to find that fulfillment somewhere. And I've talked to other guys in the group, like not every not everybody gets to experience the joy of career and purpose overlapping. Sometimes they're two separate things. And so if you can find that purpose, and it sounds like you already have, the career can be used to make the purpose happen. The examples I often give are like, drilling wells in Africa. That is like worthwhile. That's legacy building. Or rescuing kids on the southern border from being trafficked. That is purpose. That is legacy building. Um, and so I could totally work at Costco and then 3 months out of the year go down to the southern border and help people. Um, so yeah, it doesn't that block of marble doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be career. Sometimes people get wrapped around the axle saying, but my career isn't fulfilling, it's not my purpose. And that's totally okay. Find whatever your purpose is and then have the career fuel it.